What happens when Hollywood's toughest action star crosses the line with a legend? Jason Statham thought he knew everything about being tough. But on one fateful evening in Los Angeles, Statham would learn that some legends aren't just stories, they're warnings. Picture this: a crowded charity gala, cameras flashing, the who's who of Hollywood mingling with champagne glasses. Everything seems perfect until Statham spots an older man sitting quietly in the corner. Chuck Norris, the man, the myth, the legend. But to Statham, he just looked old. What happened next would shake everything Statham thought he knew about strength, respect, and the price of arrogance. The Beverly Hills Hilton buzzed with energy that September evening. The annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala had drawn Hollywood's elite. Among them stood Jason Statham, looking every inch the action hero in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. His confidence radiated through the room like an invisible force field. Statham had every reason to feel on top of the world. His latest franchise had just crossed the billion-dollar mark globally. Critics called him the last real action star, and he wore that title like a crown. At 48, he was in the best shape of his life. As he worked the room accepting congratulations and posing for photos, his eyes swept across the crowd with practiced assessment. That's when he noticed him. Sitting alone at a corner table was Chuck Norris. The man who had been a legend before Statham had even started acting. But to Statham's eyes, he just looked diminished. The gray beard, the quiet demeanor, the way he sat apart from the crowd, it all screamed past his prime. The trouble started innocently enough. Statham was holding court with young producers and directors. The conversation turned to action legends, and someone mentioned Chuck Norris's status in internet memes. "Chuck Norris doesn't do push-ups," one producer quoted with a laugh. "He pushes the earth down." The group chuckled, but Statham's expression darkened. He glanced at the quiet figure in the corner, then back at his audience. The wine had loosened his tongue. "You know," Statham said, his British accent cutting through the laughter, "those Chuck Norris jokes were funny 20 years ago. But let's be honest, the man's pushing 80. He's had his time." The group fell silent, but Statham was just getting started. "Look at him over there. Sitting alone, probably can't even remember his own movies. The guy's ancient history. These days, if you want real action, you come to someone who can still actually deliver." What Statham didn't notice was how the room had grown quieter. And in that corner, Chuck Norris slowly raised his head, his pale blue eyes meeting Statham's across the crowded room. Emboldened by what he mistook for admiration, Statham raised his voice to carry across the room. "I've got nothing but respect for what Chuck Norris did back in the day," he continued condescendingly, "but that day is long gone. Young actors need role models who are still in their prime, not museum pieces." Someone tried to change the subject, but Statham's ego was in the driver's seat. What's he going to do if someone challenged him now? The man probably needs help getting out of bed. That's when Chuck Norris stood up. It was simple, nothing dramatic. He just rose with fluid grace and began walking across the room. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and suddenly the only sound was the soft whisper of his footsteps. Up close, Chuck looked different, larger somehow. Those pale eyes held depths that spoke of experiences Statham had only pretended to have in movies. His presence filled the space with quiet authority that made Statham's bravado seem suddenly childish. "Mr. Statham," Chuck said quietly, his voice carrying despite its softness, "I couldn't help but overhear your commentary about age and capability." Chuck looked at the younger man with something that might have been pity. "You know, Jason, I was a lot like you once. Full of fire, certain that strength was about how hard you could hit, how loud you could talk." His voice took on a reflective quality. "I remember my first professional fight. I was 22, cocky as they come. My opponent was this older Korean master, maybe 55, looked frail, moved slowly during warm-ups." Chuck's eyes never left Statham's face. "I laughed at him, just like you're laughing at me now." The match lasted 47 seconds. He put me on my back so fast I didn't understand what happened until I woke up in the medical tent. Statham shifted uncomfortably but couldn't look away. "That master taught me something that changed everything," Chuck continued. He said, "Young man, strength that needs to announce itself isn't strength at all." True power moves quietly, speaks softly, and only reveals itself when absolutely necessary. But you want to know about capability, don't you, Jason? Chuck's voice remained conversational. You want to know if this old museum piece can still deliver? Without warning, Chuck's hand moved with precision that made Statham's breath catch. The older man plucked the champagne glass right out of Statham's hand, not grabbed it, but lifted it as gently as picking a flower. Then with casual ease, Chuck Norris crushed the champagne flute in his bare hand. The crystal didn't explode dramatically. It simply crumbled like sand between his fingers, pieces falling silently to the floor. Not a drop spilled. Not a single shard drew blood. The room was dead silent. 47 years of martial arts training, Chuck said quietly, brushing crystal dust from his palm. 47 years of learning that real power doesn't need an audience. Statham stared at the unmarked hand. His own hands were shaking. Everything he thought he knew about strength was crumbling like that champagne glass. The question isn't whether I'm too old, Mr. Statham. The question is whether you're mature enough to understand what real strength looks like. The aftermath was swift. Within minutes, the story spread through the gala like wildfire. By morning, the entire entertainment industry would know how Jason Statham had been humbled. But something unexpected happened. Instead of anger or embarrassment, Statham felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine respect. With that respect came crushing realization of his own arrogance. He watched Chuck return to his corner table with the same quiet dignity he'd shown all evening. No showboating, no victory lap. The older man simply picked up his water and resumed his quiet observation, as if nothing had happened. That restraint was more impressive than any action sequence Statham had ever filmed. When the gala ended, Statham walked over to Chuck's table and sat down. "I owe you an apology," he said simply. Chuck looked up, his expression neither smug nor sympathetic, just attentive. "Do you?" "I was out of line. Disrespectful. I let my ego do the talking." Chuck nodded slowly. The measure of a man isn't whether he makes mistakes. It's what he does after he realizes he's made them. That conversation changed Jason Statham profoundly. In the weeks that followed, he began studying martial arts not just for movie roles, but for the discipline behind them. He started listening more, speaking less about his own accomplishments. Most importantly, he learned that real legends don't need to defend their status. They live it quietly every day in how they treat others. Chuck Norris never spoke publicly about that evening. He didn't need to. The lesson had been delivered with the same precision as that crushed champagne glass, completely effective, leaving no doubt about the message. Statham went on to have an even more successful career, but with different confidence. One based on respect rather than arrogance, genuine skill rather than empty bravado. Whenever young actors asked about toughness, he would tell them about a quiet evening when an old master reminded him that the strongest people are often the ones who feel no need to prove it. Real strength whispers. The most dangerous people in any room are often the ones sitting quietly in the corner, comfortable in their own power, and confident enough to let their actions speak louder than their words. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from proving you're the strongest, but from realizing you still have so much left to learn.